Hello everyone, welcome. My name is MJ Pestridge. Welcome to another P3D video, and today we're going to be talking about installing airports and scenery items for P3D. So this really applies to any P3D version, but the XML section of this video only really applies to version 4, 5 and future versions of P3D. So when you get an airport or an airplane or a scenery item, there's several ways you can actually install it into your sim. You can install it straight into the root folder of the simulator, which is in program files for me, Lockheed Martin version 5, and as you can see, I do actually have got some planes, some scenery items already installed straight into the root of the sim. And sometimes the installer won't actually allow you to change the pathway. It will automatically find your sim based on the registry and want to install it there. Aerosoft are quite known for that. Most of theirs will do that by default. The only way around that, if you wanted to put it somewhere else, would be to change the pathway to trick the installer. You could actually change it to a dummy location, which is sometimes what I do. Depending on which version of the add-on I'm installing, I set up a dummy location, and it usually has an exe file in here. And depending if it's a FSX version or a P3D version, it will install it to here, and then I can move it to wherever I want. Also, another way to install it, other than the root sim, is in the P3D version, whatever, add-ons. So as you can see here, I've got some airports, I've got some planes, and some other add-ons. Now, most of these that don't have the number at the beginning basically live in this directory and don't actually come out at all. But everything that has a number, I only keep in here when I'm using it, and then I delete it out. And all these contain are the link XML files to where the actual add-on is, which I have in a separate directory on a separate drive. For my P3D, these are the XML files, and then the actual add-on itself, depending if it's an airport or a scenery item, is linked in here. And I keep all my airports together, I keep all my aircraft together, and I keep all my cities and scenery items together as well, that don't get installed into the sim root folder. Now the XML way I'm going to talk about at the end, but that is another way to do it. And of course, the third and final way to install something is by having it put in the sort of sim or another folder, and it's literally just two folders. So if we go into any one of these, that is literally just that. It'll just have a scenery and texture file, and then this can be linked in version 5 to anywhere you like. It doesn't matter. In version 4, I believe it has to be linked to the sim or on the same drive as the sim, and then in versions 1 to 3 it has to be within the sim folder itself. Current versions mean you can place your add-ons anywhere. Now the airport files folders only require scenery and texture, but sometimes they will contain a lot more. And if we go back to the airports here sometimes will contain an effects file. If I can find one, here we go. This one I got on Sim Market also has an effects file. Now, back in the old days of FSX, this would get installed into the simulator. The effects files would go in the effects folder for the sim, and then the airport itself here, which is for version 4, would contain the scenery and texture, which could literally just go into the scenery library. And if we have a look at my scenery library, you'll see that some are XMLs, which are the ones that are sitting in this folder, and then the rest are white, and they are actually a part of the scenery library. They are the scenery library. Now, I want to quickly talk about the difference between an XML and a scenery item. An XML is a package folder add-on that can contain multiple folders, the airport, effects, sound, sim objects, whatever it needs to be, and then is linked to your scenery library, but it's not actually a part of your scenery library. It sits on top of your scenery library. So the indexes will contain the add-on XMLs first, and then starting with the first white entry, this is actually the top of my scenery library. And if we go all the way down, you'll see I do also again have XMLs that have been layered in. Now these won't move, these are stuck on this layer, and the scenery items move around. Now if you have Orbex products in your sim, the recommended way to install Orbex products, if you have airports, they can be XML'd, not a problem, which means your library can sit anywhere, and as you can see mine is on the F drive. But the global stuff, the True Earth stuff, and any regional stuff really must live inside your scenery library and be a part of it, because it might need to move around a few things in order to work compatibly fully with airports or other add-ons like mesh and other vector data you might use. And if it's an XML add-on, it kind of just sits on top unless it's been layered in, and then it's stuck on that layer, so you can't actually move it around unless you get a third-party manager add-on. Now the problem with a third-party manager add-on is that Orbex has its own add-on manager built within Central, and every time you fire up Central, it accesses your simulator files. It actually configures them as well, even though you haven't done anything. You can set your insertion point for where the Orbex stuff will sit compared to everything else, and Orbex do a great job at layering their stuff in with your other third-party items and the default. You really don't need any other scenery manager in order to run your sim. In fact, if you are using Orbex Central and then another scenery manager, you're actually constantly changing your scenery library around, because Orbex may also shift things around without you knowing, or might manage your add-ons even if you don't set your insertion point. And then of course your third-party manager add-on is going to do the same, and this can cause confusion in the indexes. What are the indexes? The indexes are a series of data files, basically listing all the sim objects in any given location of the world. And again, the top of the list will contain your add-on XMLs, and then it will run down. And you might find that you have more than like I have, or less than I have, but this is basically a quick and dirty index of everything and where it's located, so it makes the sim faster to load. Now the simulator, if you make a change in the sim, like if I tick this and click OK, it is now generating a new database based on the inclusion of what I just ticked. Now, what I find in version 5 is it doesn't actually remove items from this list, it only adds them and then adjusts everybody else, giving it an accurate layering. So if I go back in now and I untick that one that I just ticked, like, it will say that it's generating the indexes because there has been a change in the scenery library that triggers the generation or the regeneration of the indexes in the sim. But just because I have ticked that, which to be honest that actually needs to be ticked anyway, was that the one I ticked? Must be. But if I untick it and it then goes and generates these, it doesn't actually delete the information. It leaves that information in here and then generates the other ones around it. And what I tend to find is if I was to go in the simulator now, I would actually have problems in my sim until the next load, and then the problems would subside. But the one thing I find that is really helpful is any changes that you make in your scenery library, just come into your scenery indexes 64 folder, highlight everything, and delete everything within this folder. I want to shut the sim down now. And basically, the next time you load up your sim, the sim will rebuild this index. Now, the more add-ons you have in your sim and the more XML add-ons you have, the longer the generation of the list building will be. So just be patient when you load into your splash screen. It is now rebuilding this database, so it will take a lengthy time if you've deleted everything. As you saw in my scenery library, I don't actually have everything ticked. The reason being is that when you have everything ticked and you load up your sim, there is a cache created. It doesn't matter if wherever you're flying in the world, everything ticked loads as part of this cache and then only renders what you're going to be flying around. So if you only fly in America, then obviously the rest of the world doesn't get rendered, but it's still part of that cache initial load. So the more things you have ticked, the longer it takes to load. So I only tick the things I'm going to see in my flight, and then I make sure to delete my indexes so it generates, based off the flight I'm going to do, an accurate index, and it loads quicker into the sim. And if there is a problem with an airport that you fly over, as it loads into the sim, it could trigger a crash. So the less airports you have in your simulator at any one time, the less chances of a crash. Now, back to installing an airport. So you have a few options when you're installing an airport. You can either install it as an add-on XML, or you can install it into the scenery library. And it's totally up to you which way you do it. The installer might even offer you which way would you like to do it, or it might automatically just throw it in anyway. Add-ons are kind of typically known for forcing their location on you, and you don't get the chance to move them. But if you want, once you've installed the airport as an add-on XML, and an XML basically is pretty simple. It contains an XML file, a text file, and if we open this one up for UK 2000, it's just a list of instructions on where you're going to find that airport, which is on my D drive, which is here. And if I scroll down, you'll find all my UK 2000s here. And it's basically just a set of instructions pointing to the folder where the airport is. Now, if you, once you've installed your add-on and it's gone into this folder and you don't wish to actually have it in this folder because it might be sitting on your C drive or a drive with limited space, you can just move it, right? All you have to do is cut out the folder, put it wherever you want, and then come back to this file here, the XML file, and change the path of where it's located, so the sim will still pick it up. Now, it will still work as intended. The registry path though won't change, so once you've installed any add-on, it's registered to this location. So if you uninstall it, it will say we can't find the folder. But if you've moved it, all you have to do is delete that folder and it's uninstalled. The XML process is a very easy and quick way to install things into your sim and keep them installed. So if you uninstall your sim, you don't have to remove all your add-ons because they're separate, completely separate from your sim, but they get included into your sim as a separate add-on package. So XML installations are really beneficial for reinstall of the sim, and if you run a repair, it doesn't touch any of your add-ons, it just touches the initial files of the sim. So if you do have to uninstall your sim and reinstall it, like in the old days, everything would get deleted, but not so in current versions of P3D. It'll just be the sim, and all your add-ons will still be linked via the folder. If we go back to program data, via this add-on CFG file, as well as all your scenery library items in this CFG file for scenery. So again, you won't have to uninstall your scenery stuff as long as those two files remain in program data. And when you uninstall your sim, the program data folder and all of its contents remains, so it doesn't actually delete those files. So the other way to install an add-on is straight into your scenery library, and most likely it will go either into the root folder or it will ask you where you would like to place it. And again, you can place your airports anywhere you like on any drive. The more drives you have loading into the sim, the quicker the loading takes. As long as they're SSDs, you won't get a dip in performance by having, say, 3 drives of airports loading into your sim. It will actually be quicker. And they are a part of your scenery library. So when you run the installer and it says like where do you want to install it, you can choose where to put it, and then it will either automatically insert the required entry into your scenery library, or if it doesn't, all you have to do is come to add area, browse for wherever you've placed your add-on, click OK. The title will appear here. You can change that to whatever you want. Make sure use this scenery is ticked, then click OK, and then it will appear at the top. And I really suggest layering your simulator according to the geographical position of the world. So obviously the night lighting sits on top of everything, but the first item I have for airports is this AGGV. This is in the Pacific, the French Polynesia area. That's where my scenery library starts, and then it goes east around the world. So we eventually hit, the Cook Islands, Fiji, Hawaii, America. Scrolling down, we got Mexico, South America, moving across the Bahamas to England, to Europe, to Africa, to Italy, and then just going east across the world until eventually we end up in New Zealand, which is the end of my library. And the reason I layer it like this is sometimes you'll have folders that have to sit on top of each other in a certain order for them to work completely. So like land class typically will go at the bottom, and then regions, and then cities, and then airports. They have to be layered very correctly, otherwise things won't appear in the sim correctly, or you'll get crashes. But also, I will know if my scenery library starts to break down on me, which it can do with XMLs being inserted all the time, and then scenery items being inserted, and things moving around. I will know if anything breaks because this order will shift, and I'll go, oh, that you shouldn't be here. Why have you moved? And then I can work that problem before it actually becomes a problem, because your scenery library is the most important piece of your sim, and it can break. It can sort of error over time, especially if you're loading in loads of XMLs and then installing scenery items after that. The XMLs sometimes will stick in a layer because they've been told to. They won't move, so your scenery moves around it, but the indexes won't change unless you delete and regenerate. And that's the one big cause for non-loading sims, is your scenery indexes being messed up. Now, I only keep the XMLs in the sim that I'm actually going to use, so I don't get a massive load of add-on XMLs here in my scenery library. The more add-on XML you have in your sim, and then you're still installing stuff in the future, the more chance it's going to error and lock out. And it locks out because as I say, the add-on XMLs are separate. They sit on top. Some are layered within. But if you install an airport that actually is required to sit at a certain point in your library, but an XML is sitting there, then it can cause confusion and errors. And I just find it best if the XML add-ons only live in the sim when I need them, and then I remove them out, delete my indexes, and I've got another clean sort of scenery library again. The installation for airports and scenery and aircraft are all the same. In fact, the aircraft ones are probably the ones that are different because they all will go in the airplanes folder. Again, I only have the planes that I'm actively going to be using in this folder. Otherwise, they sit in this folder here, the ones that I'm not using, so they don't load as part of my sim load up. I find that you can actually have slower loading times if you have hundreds of airplanes here, as opposed to say 5. Your sim will actually load a bit quicker. So there's many things I do just to save loading times, but also to try and prevent crashes. At the end of the day, P3D is a very old based sim, and you will get crashes because it uses DLLs as part of its sort of native architecture, and they are so prone to corrupting on your hard drive. And that is why you have the repair feature for P3D, where you can go in and actually repair the sim, refresh the files if any DLL has errored. And to be honest, crashes most likely happen because a DLL, which is a dynamic link library, has errored, corrupted on your drive, and that has tripped the sim and triggered the crash. The easiest fix is just to repair your sim, refresh the files, and you've now got a working clean DLL file. The installation of airports is very easy, and if you understand how the XML process works, then it is even easier to install. Like I said before, if you want to move your XML add-ons out of the P3D 5 add-ons, they don't have to live there. They can live anywhere they want, because they contain this file here, which is a link file instructing the sim where it's going to find the airport. And as long as you update that location anytime you move it, the sim will find it and it still will insert it in. And you know, like I said, don't keep every XML add-on in your sim and everything ticked. It takes longer to load, and it increases the chances of a crash if an airport isn't done well. That's basically about it for installing airports. Now, who knows what will happen in the future in terms of installing things in future versions of P3D. Version 6 has yet to even sort of be officially announced or even released, so nobody really knows what that's going to entail. But the past history of P3D has always been the same, even back from FSX, where you have airports as separate add-ons that are installed into your library, and in recent versions you can XML these items to separate them from the sim, but also have them in the sim for easy uninstallation and reinstallation. And yeah, who knows what the future will hold. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's helped you sort of get a clearer clearer vision of how to install or where you can install. You remember, you don't have to put them in the version 5 add-ons or the sim root folder. I actually find keeping the sim root folder as clean as possible is more beneficial than having everything shoved in there. I really recommend having your airports, your scenery items on separate drives. So have one for airports, have one for scenery, and one for aircraft. And then your sim drive will be your C drive mainly, or it could be any drive. And it will have a much cleaner time than everything being piled into the same directory. If you're loading off just one hard drive, everything, you know, that hard drive only has a certain amount of bandwidth that it can actually give data to flow through. And if that hard drive, be it an SSD, an M2, is caching files on the same drive that it's reading from, that's making everything slower. So the more drives you get involved, the quicker everything happens, and you know, the smoother experience you will have with P3D. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget, I run a giveaway every month, at the end of every month, for 50 euros of sim market vouchers. To be in with a chance, all you have to do is put a comment down in any one of my P3D videos of the month I do the giveaway, be a subscriber to my channel, and at the end of the month, the last few days, I go live with a vlog and announce the giveaway winner. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.